Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. Always in the studio with me is the wonderful Mr. Eric Morin.
With the wonderful, amazing Matthew Maffei. Good morning, sir. Good to see you.
I figured I would do more hand gestures so people that, are only listening via, Spotify and podcasts and Audible, that they get the visual effect too if you go to YouTube. So you get some hand gestures to go into place when I introduce Eric now.
I'm gonna do
stay tuned.
Next time I'm gonna do some slides that you can only see if you go on YouTube, and there's like a magic prize in there. You have to go to YouTube to catch the prize.
Just to view it. And I think, it's been a couple weeks. I know you've been freaking all across the country and traveling, speaking engagements, meeting with people. So we're finally back in the studio, and I think we got a good topic to speak about today. I know we were just briefly discussing, this week, like some of the things that are happening in the marketplace. And one of the things that a lot of people are calling in about are, trying to get to multiple locations. Should I sell my practice? Buy practice, what do I need to do? So I think, what would you say is going on in the marketplace, and what should people be looking at right now?
Well, I've had two very emotional, passionate conversations about this topic, and to be honest with you, it kind of upset me a little bit. And so I said, someone told me twice on this same conversation, they're like, you should do a podcast on that. And I said, okay, here I go. So, I was telling you a little bit, sellers beware. What I'm seeing in the, and this is so important to see. There's some things that are happening in the marketplace that are really disturbing. And, when the opportunity is ripe, the wolves come out. And so what I'm seeing is organizations come to doctors that, let's just say, have an okay practice doing 1.4 million in revenue, and they'll come and say, I'll give you 80% of that practice today, and you'll become an employee with me. Or for me, and then what happens 10 years from now, I'm going to give you $10 million for your practice. And they're throwing out these numbers, and these doctors will call up and they'll be like, they're offering me $10 million in 10 years if I just give up my practice and I do whatever they tell me to do. And I, so it's like this. And so what these doctors are doing is that literally these people are convincing these doctors to take away. First of all, they don't look at the financial impacts to what happens to their income. They don't realize that after they pay their debt service off and their taxes, there's nothing there. And so they're going to be, in a sense, in some ways, indentured servants, it feels like. So they're going to be working for this DSO on the hope that there's some future valuation there. Now, here's the problem with that. And by the way, I have no problem with DSOs. I have no problem with growing the business. What I have a problem is unethical practices. And so when we go and look at this subject, I was like, it's the same thing as, this is what's happening. And this is why that whole $10 million in the future is just horse crap. Because you can't promise someone that. So think about this for a moment. So the mortgage-backed security crisis back in 2008, 2009, and all those things, what was happening was there was speculative treatment of mortgage-backed securities. And what was happening was there's fundamentally the fundamental problem was that the people borrowing the money couldn't pay it back. And so you had these mortgage-backed securities that were overinflated, and the problem was that Waffle House waitresses were getting $800,000 mortgages because it was all stated income, stated asset. So the true tangibility of that business was garbage. Now, what's happening is I see these so-called DSOs, because I wouldn't really say that they're a support organization. They're kind of, they call themselves that, but they're not. And then they have bad business principles, and they're literally trying to use speculation to convince somebody to come off of their hard work and their life's work. People that have put 35 years into their practice on some pipe dream. But the problem is I'm watching these companies buy garbage. I'm telling you, I've watched some of these companies buy fundamentally crap practices that are garbage, that are losing money. And when you start giving 16 times multiple and those types of things on these practices, on top of that, when you start to go, hey, let's look at, you start to pile these things up, which you got to keep the doctors. You got to have a management team. You have to ultimately have an acquisition group. Now, there are great dental service organizations, and there are great large independent group dental practices, which are not the same thing. But you have these two, I think, by the way, the practice that wins out in the day, a lot of the independent dentistry is going to be with the independent practitioner who owns multiple locations, who's kind of the mid-market group, who cares about their team members, who cares about doctors, who provides an amazing place to win. That person's going to thrive in the future marketplace. But what I'm seeing is how does somebody promise you a 16 multiple when, and by the way, there are reasons why a 16 multiple makes sense, but guys, at the end of the day, there's a CFA at the end of this, a certified financial analyst. There's people looking at this that I guarantee you that's not in writing. That back end is a promise, and you gotta go back, and I've been telling these doctors, I see this, send me your contract, because what's happening is, how do you understand, and this is the other thing that you see, I get kind of passionate about this because people are being gypped out of their life work. The other part about this is, now I'm not saying that there's not large multiples in the future, who knows? Yeah. But I do believe that that's for a group that is financially sound, with a whole executive suite, who knows how to run a business, who has strong business principles, who has marketing, who is scalable. Like, that's a good business, because by the way, if it doesn't sell, it's okay. It's still pouring cash. It's still doing well. It's still a profitable business. The one that was losing money, when you buy 20 businesses that are losing money for a multiple that doesn't even make sense, you got to flip that to somebody who's gullible enough to buy your garbage. But at some point, that shit's got to hit the fan. And what happens is now we look at, and this is literally within the last 2 weeks, Matthew, I've had probably 10 practices tell me we're selling off in 5 years for a 16 multiple. Okay, I want you to hear me on this. There are practices that will sell for a high multiple. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm saying is, if everyone's going to market in 5 years to get a 16 multiple, you might see that there's a lot of supply in that marketplace. And unless you have a lot of, your financials are buttoned up, your systems are buttoned up, your operations are buttoned up, you're not going to get a 16 multiple unless it's pure speculation and then we're still in a speculative market, because the financial backing of that is not going to make sense. So when somebody's selling off half of their practice or giving away 100% of their practice for 80% of the collections, or not, it's technically 100%, but a good portion of it, in hopes that they're 20% of the business or whatever it ends up being, they're going to get some gigantic multiple in the future. Look, there are some deals you can get on the front side. I get it, and all those sorts of things. But you got to hear what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, right now, there are wolves out there in the marketplace who are taking doctors and getting them to give up their life's work on some future promise of a multiple that they cannot guarantee. You can't guarantee that. This guy says, well, we got 100 practices that we have promised, 160 practices. We've promised them all $10 million. Well, that's 1.6 billion valuation there before we even go anything, before there's even room on this thing. Look, I need people to calm down. Look, if Bitcoin is only worth $10,000 and you pay $60,000 for it, well, you should have bought it at $60,000 if it's only worth 10. If a house is only worth $500,000, but it's an awesome market and you paid $950 for it, it was still only worth $500,000. You just overpaid for it. If you buy a business that is losing money, or has a single practitioner office that the doctor's about to retire in 3 years and has a 12% margin and everything's run through there, and this thing isn't run worth of garbage, and you pay 200% of collections, well, that's a boneheaded move. And so you have to,
I think, I had a conversation with, a doctor the other day that called in, and he, inevitably speaking, sold off most of his practices DSO. Well, the contract, number one, a lot of times what I see in the industry is, if someone is, say, a $3-4 million practice, they, generally speaking, think they know what to look for in what the terms and the deals and everything are. They don't have anyone objectively looking at the contract saying, no, this is actually what it means. If you go ask your broker, your financial advisor, you ask everybody else, they're going to say, oh, it's a great deal, because they're all going to get incentivized on the back end. Well, one of the things he didn't realize was he got put into a non-compete. So after he got out of that contract, he's still in a non-compete and he can't do anything within a certain mile radius. So he's looking at practices and it's like, all right, so where do I go? Do I have to drive now because I have to go within a certain, like a long distance away from where I currently am? I think in the marketplace right now, there's a lot of people that think they kind of know more than they do. And then when the deal ultimately gets done, a couple of years later, they're like, all right, what did I do here? So you have to have someone objectively looking at it. I think part of the reason you're having so many of these conversations is because they know who to ask, and they're asking you directly. They're saying, Eric, this is what's happening. This is the deal that might be in place. What do you think about it? And as you're stating, it's crap. Like, you're looking at them and you're saying, no, like, this part looks great, but this big chunk of it right here that you might not notice in the contract, this is what this means in layman's terms. Boom, boom, boom. Does that sound like something you want to do? And they're objectively saying, oh, no, it's not. No one showed me that. That's the issue
in business. I've been coaching finance and business for as long as I can remember. And I will tell you, I've always told people that there are three types of investments. There are bunts, there's base hits, and there's home runs. Okay. And I always tell people, don't get them confused. Ultimately speaking, your bunts are conservative type vehicles that are going to be there for the long run, whether it be savings accounts or money in a whole life policy or CDs or whatever it is under your mattress or whatever you want to call it, whatever's safe money, wherever you want to put safe money, you could put it in bonds, whatever you want to put safe money. And then there's the home runs. This is the money you can afford to lose. This is the money that you can swing for the fences for, that, it's a speculative deal, and, maybe throw it in some kind of special purpose acquisition company type deal. And it's, hopefully this something technology goes public, and look, there are home runs that you swing for the fence for, and you might or might not get them. And then there's the safe base hit. Okay. The base hit is what you count on. The base hit is your business. The base hit is your 401k. The base hit is, right, your investment accounts, the stuff that you actually plan on being there. And I always tell people, don't mistake the two. They're not the same. Yeah. So what's happening is there are companies that are convincing individuals that their base hit should be their home run. And if they gamble with their base hit, that there'll be a home run for them. The problem is that we do not know what the future market is. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to say this again. Look, we work with great groups that have great business practices that in time will be worth selling for a great multiple because they built a great foundational business, and they don't need to sell because the cash flow is strong, the EBITDA is strong, they've got great culture, they've got great systems, they've got a great business. That is not what I'm talking about today. What I am talking about today there's a lot of people, this market, people have seen large multiples. So what they've done, by the way, if it's like the people, like all the hemp industry was already like done. And then people are like, I'm going to get into CBD oil. It's like, you were about 5 years too late, buddy. It's like Bitcoin's at $62,000 and people go, I think I'm going to get into Bitcoin. I'm like, you missed the part.
You missed the boat.
So I think what you're seeing is, there's a lot of people in the dental space that, I just got calls from, I think I got 3 calls last week from somebody who asked me to help them start a group. And it's like, yeah. and look, they always have some crafty, like, let me show you how we're going to do this. We're going to convince the doctors they should give up all their equity and give it to us. And then we're going to, look, I've seen, look, whatever system you're creating that you think no one else is doing, you're wrong. Okay. You are. And so I've had people sit down and tell me like, we're doing it, Wade. Nobody else is doing it. Yes, they are. Other people are doing it. And so I think that what prevails is strong business fundamentals. If you bought a house in 2005, I left Florida in 2005 because a 1,700 square foot home was almost $700,000 with no backyard, no granite, nothing. And there were 72 people on the waiting list. Okay, yeah. It was insane. I wasn't going to buy that house at such a stupid price, okay? It made no sense. And sure, we saw the market drop and what happened. People ask me, is there a bubble coming in the dental industry? Of course there is. You can't buy a bunch of garbage and practices where doctors are not sticking there long term. There's no fundamentally sound operations. You haven't built a system and hope that you can put a hodgepodge of garbage together, flip it. Look, you got to build one hell of a system 10 years from now, but the math's got to work. At the end of the day, the math's got to work. And so when you start telling somebody that you think that they should give up their life's work because in 10 years from now, they're going to get this giant thing, well, that's just crap because there's no way you can guarantee what someone's going to get 10 years from now. There's no way you can guarantee what the marketplace is going to get 10 years from now. There's no guarantee. First of all, stocks are ultimately graded on management. I mean, we can talk about ultimately at the end of the day, you're buying someone's management. And you don't even know their management. I watched a DSO go through $5 million in 31 days. You don't know their management structure. You don't know how sound they are. You don't know that their burn rate. You don't know anything about this DSO. All you know is some group told you they had a bunch of people in the deal together, and then now you're going to sell off half your practice or give up all your practice to someone. You don't even know the management. You don't know their background. Yeah. You don't know their history. I had a private equity company call me last week. They wanted me to give them advice and pay me for my advice. So they're trying to get in this, but you don't know who's backing this. You don't know what's behind this. And look, there's a lot of speculative money. You go, but Eric, but they're private equity, and there's really smart people involved with this situation. How could it go wrong? I don't know. Yeah. Why don't you go ask Lehman Brothers?
And I think they're doing. They're using the flip side of that too, almost as a tactic. You'll also sell off for, you'll get a 16 multiple in 10 years, but they're also saying, well, with everything that's happening in the marketplace right now, with all the inflation and the uncertainty and everything, it's just better if you group up with this private equity because you'll be more insulated for vulnerabilities. You'll have more opportunities to make sure you make it through the storm. So I see it as, both situations.
Are there, now you might be listening to go, well, Eric, are there 16 multiples? Are you trying to say that there's no way someone's going to get a 16 multiple in 5 years or 10 years? No, I'm not saying that at all. Somebody might get a 16 multiple. Or will they get 12 years, a 12 multiple, 14 multiple? Could quite possibly. I'm not saying that can't happen at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not actually saying that somebody won't get that. But the practice that's bought for a high multiple will be a practice that's fundamentally sound with great practices, a great business that has a strong EBITDA, a strong executive management team that knows, that bought right. They didn't buy a bunch of garbage at overvaluation. They bought they bought good practices, maybe turned them great. They bought things that were fundamentally sound, or if they weren't fundamentally sound, they bought them at a price that was the right price, and then they're going to increase the valuation of those practices. They're going to use business fundamentals. But to take somebody whose business is not fundamentally sound, and when I say that, what I mean is that might be a decent business, but to tell somebody that I'm going to give you, 1.2 million or 1.4 million for your practice now, and then I promise you'll get the rest of it will go into our group, which we're going to promise you $10 million in 5 years. I think that's crazy. I think that how can you promise the future valuation? How can you promise what the market's going to be doing? We do know that there's a recession coming. We do know that there's changes in the marketplace. We do know that, depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of concern. I think that you've got to be, as I said, seller beware, is that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And it's interesting because great practices know what their value is and they don't settle. But what's happening is these people, it's not the sophisticated practice that's getting hurt. And I was talking to a lawyer the other day. I said, I've talked to 2 lawyers about this. I said, I see a giant class action lawsuit coming. Gigantic, because when you sell 200 dentists that they're about to get a $10 million check in 5 years, and you've sold them to give away their life's work so that they could get this $10 million check, and they didn't get it because you promised them and they've all sold off to you, I see a problem brewing. I see a big problem brewing, and you want to be as far away from that bomb as possible. And look, I'm telling you, just like, look, no difference that I was telling you when I said interest rates are going to go up, housing market's going to go down. Look, these are predictabilities. One of the things I've always done on this podcast is I've just talked about things that, like, let's get away from the emotion and let's use business principles and finance principles and actually think through this for a minute. I understand how a company can get a 16 multiple. I understand how if you buy in early and it rolls up what the future valuation. I get all that. You don't need to pull that math. I know what the math looks like. But you cannot promise a future valuation. You can't, because there's no way to know what the marketplace looks like in 5 years or 10 years. What you can do is you can say, this is what our assumptive plan is, or you can show a pro forma, even though a pro forma over 36 months is garbage. But you can start talking about what you feel like this is going to do, but it's speculative. It is speculative. And you're taking your base hit and rolling it into that. Now, if you want to grow a great business and sell it for a 12 multiple, 10 multiple, 12, 14 multiple, 16 multiple, you can do that. If you want to build a really fundamentally sound, but you also have to be willing to have a business that cash flows and does great. So if 5 years the marketplace isn't paying, you can hold on maybe for 8 years or 10 years or even 12 years. Because I've seen a lot of stuff in the marketplace that's just garbage.
Yeah.
It just is.
Do you think it's part of the reason why some people are looking to sell is just because they think that, they're using the reverse analogy where you buy when it's low and you sell when it's high? You think they're doing that, or they're just like, the market's hot right now, so I have to take advantage of it, so I might as well sell my practice?
Well, look, let's go to Bitcoin for a second since I brought it up. Okay, at $60,000, everyone's thinking they're a fool that they didn't buy it at $20,000, right? They're like, why did I just buy it at $20,000, right? The guy who really did well is the guy who bought it $70, right, or whatever, but even less
when it first started.
But okay, so what's happening to we see, and NFTs are getting hurt worse, and depending on all the speculative stuff that's happened the last few years. But if Bitcoin's so great, why aren't you buying the world out of Bitcoin? Right, as it's fallen down, right? Because people may make emotional decisions. If you believe that Bitcoin is a long-term viable instrument, then you should have a price at which you're willing to buy it, because that you would say that the market's down and you think it's going to go back up. But no, people stay away. In 2008, 2009, 2010, that's when you should have been buying stocks, right? But what do people do? They wait till the market's at all-time highs and then they start buying stocks. I think it's very... and my point in that is, they say people lose money in the stock market because of fees and fears. And because they buy high and they sell low. And so what's happening is, like, this is why every Yahoo, I say Yahoo because some of these people are Yahoos. I don't know what technically a Yahoo would be, but I'm going to use that word for today. It's a technical term.
Yes.
In business,
it's a great term.
If you go to Harvard Business School, they'll use the term Yahoo. Just kidding. So Yahoo, these Yahoos are overnight saying, I'm going to be a millionaire and I'm going to get a bunch of hodgepodge practices, but I don't have any money and nobody of sense would buy into my business plan. So I'll try to convince these people to give up their practice because I don't have any capital, and all this other, like, these just fly by night scenarios where it's like, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the practice to do this. I'm going to tell the practice. Okay, I'm not saying some of those aren't good, by the way. I'm not saying, by the way, don't take offense to it. If you've got a really good business model that's fundamentally sound, then great. That doesn't pertain to you. But there's a lot of people, and my frustration around this conversation is around the people that are convincing doctors to give up their life's work, take a gigantic pay cut in hope of the future that someday there'll be a payoff. I can't imagine if someone told me, cut your income in half right now, Eric, and maybe if everything holds up true, you'll make some money in the future. I just I like to be in control. I want to manage my future. And look, maybe the check now, if someone gives you a big enough check up front that was your number, if you wanted $5 million and you got $5 million, and then they tell you, hey, look, work for a few years and we can give you a back end that we think will be worth X amount, well, that might make more sense, right? And so at least you got your number. So I'm not even talking about that deal. I'm talking about the deal where somebody convinces someone to take a depreciate when they could have gotten $3 million for their practice, but they took $1.2 million for their practice in hope that there would be a future valuation down the road that they might or might not get. Don't do that stuff. Like, you got to be careful. The second of all is you got to position your group to where if in 5 years everyone's coming to market, because by the way, everyone I talk to says they're coming to market in 5 years. If in 5 years, because so many people are coming to market, that it pushes up supply and pushes down, ultimately the price, which means how much they'll pay it for a valuation standpoint. You got to look at those things and say, hey, that's fine. You got to be able to look at a marketplace in 5 years and go, We don't need to sell now. We'll just keep growing and we'll keep building this thing. It cash flows, it does well. And when the market's right, we'll sell it. You got to be willing to do that. You got to be willing to have the holding costs. You have to be willing to hold the group until the timing's right for your group to sell. Even private equity funds have a time period. They don't, where they can extend the sale. So I always like when I say the word sale. It's got that's that sale, but
the sale.
But I think it's important for people to make sure they're fundamentally sound. Quit letting people get emotional. Like every single person in the dental industry I've spoken to over the last 24 months has tried to get me to work with them on a DSO. Okay, stop. If you have no access to capital and you don't have a good fundamentally sound plan, and you got to think through. There's got to be a fundamentally sound plan. Now, as I said, I want to hit this one more time because I know people are listening to this that I work with that are groups and are wondering, hey, is he talking about me? I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about good, fundamentally sound business groups. That's not what I'm talking about. Because I actually think that those business groups that are independently owned by dentists, and maybe at some point they take on some equity, some private equity, or maybe at some point they take on some investment capital of another source, or maybe they're leveraging, doing some kind of leverage buyouts, and they're doing all kinds of different plays.
Yeah.
I'm not saying those groups aren't going to do well, and I'm not saying they're going to not get a great multiple, but I see a storm coming in this marketplace when I see businesses that are being bought that are garbage, that the doctor's not going to stay on board, the associate's not going to stay on board, they can't maintain culture, it wasn't making money to begin with, and they're buying a whole bunch of these things, and they're wrapping them together and hoping to sell it to somebody else before they figure out that this thing is garbage. And I'm just telling you, I see a lot of problems coming in the future. I can see a bubble coming because of the fact that people are buying things that don't make sense. And one of the ways they're buying now to get over some of that, where the numbers don't work, because of the numbers don't work for some of these, they're convincing people that they should give up their life's work for a pipe dream and a hope. And I think that's a mistake.
I think a lot of, I've had a few conversations with doctors that are just like in high acquisition mode. And when I look at their current practices, they're not even functioning to 60% of their capacity. And that's,
how many of those do we come across? Yeah, right.
I'm like, what are you doing? So, I had a conversation with a practice that has 3 locations, and they were trying to get up to a 4th location, and the bank denied their loan. And I was like, well, yeah, because you don't have any, like, if you present to them your 3 businesses and they see crap, they're not going to lend you more money to go buy more crap. So it's just, I see it in the marketplace right now where everyone is, trying to acquire all these practices. And then I look at the capacity of their current organization and I say, all right, well, you have 2 locations now. You could increase your revenue, I don't know, a few $1 million just in those couple locations instead of going to buy more basically team members and problems. Like, why don't we figure this component out now? And then we can discuss that in the future. And also, when you go to the bank for a loan, you're probably going to get the loan because you'll have assets to show them that are cash flowing and have the cash in hand. You have the team in place that you can support this. I think that's the biggest issue right now is people are just so antsy to get stuff done instead of just
building it right. Right. Buy it right. Like, we work with a group that I think the world of, and they look at the business fundamentals, they look at the numbers, they make sure it makes sense. Like, you've got to make sure. So there's a lot of ways to do this right. And I just want to let you guys know, like, if you are somebody who wants to do that, there's a way to do it right. You're right. How many times do we have? And here's another thing I want people to think about. If you are an aspiring group, if you are the person who says, look, I'm going to do it the way Eric says, I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to build things of financially strong groups. I'm going to build it strong and have good financial acumen and good business acumen. And I'm going to build the organization and the structure and the strategy and do that right. If I'm going to be that group, which is different, then you've got to know fundamentally how to have all the right things in place and not buy things poorly and be humble. Look, the difference is, and Matthew, you and I both see this. So the groups that I work with that move quickly are the ones that are humble, the ones that listen to advice, the ones that they listen and then they speak. They're willing to pay for advisory relationships. How is it that you're going to be $100 million group, but your ass won't pay $4,000 a month for some consulting. Get out of here. You know, I laugh at that because it's so true. There's some of these people who are like, how are you going to build a group without advisors? You're going to build $100 million organization and you have no advisors? You are not that damn smart. And what I mean by that is that, look, it's not that you're not an intelligent person. It's just the fact that you don't have all the knowledge. There's people that do this all day, every day. And so you're not going to, bring people around you that can help you create it. Because one of the things I notice, and I don't know, you can back me up on this too, Matthew, but the groups that are struggling, the so-called groups that are struggling, they got to 3 locations and they're stuck, is because the owner thinks that they have all the flipping answers. And you talk to them and it's like talking to a wall. They're like, oh, I've got it all figured out. I listen to this podcast. I know it all. I know everything about everything and I know how to do everything. And you go like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Like you're stuck. Your 3 practices are doing $4 million. You have no organization. You have no financial acumen. You have no business acumen. You have no capital. You have no access to capital, but you have all the answers. So there is a part of this that the whole humble, hungry, smart, if you are going to build a group. So I think we're all over the place a little bit on this podcast. I'll bring it in a little bit because these are like, maybe this is a venting session. Look, if you're going to sell your practice, sell it right. Do it in a way that if this is your financial future, don't gamble your business away. If you're looking at a proposal and if you decide to sell your practice, look at the proposal and see if it makes sense. Hell, run it by me. Run it by, our team. Look, if you're really going to do that, you're putting your financial future, your income, your working hours, everything over the next 5 to 10 years in someone else's hands, and you're gambling on the future. Have someone take a look at it. Is it worth a few $1,000s for someone to take a look at that for you? Or because you're gambling a tremendous amount of your future on some proposal from some guy you don't even know. So if you're going to do that, be careful. There's a lot of wolves out there. One of the things I tell people, listen, when somebody passes away, or when someone's business is struggling or whatever, I'm telling you, the wolves, like if you'll just be quiet for a minute, you'll hear the wolves come out. I had a doctor pass away one time and I remember telling the family, I'm like, be careful, the wolves are coming. Let me tell you what, this is what happened. The first person who called them, and this isn't an anti-religious thing or anything to take it the way I'm telling you, the first person who called them was the pastor. Literally, his funeral had not even taken place. And he was like, I'm getting that money still, right? You're still getting the money that I was pledged. Look, everybody starts thinking about themselves sometimes when you're in a tough situation. You'll be surprised. Like I've seen people pass away and watch all the people come out of the woodwork to take advantage of this person that's in this tough situation. When your business is struggling, don't be surprised if the wolves come out to come get you and try to convince you to come into some deal that doesn't make sense. So look, be careful. And if you have a great business, that doesn't mean the wolves aren't coming for you too. So you have to be careful in this marketplace because I think you need to understand that there are people who are opportunists who will try to take advantage of you. So do not take your base hit and call it a home run. Let's be fundamentally sound. If you're building a group, make sure that you have strong business acumen. Make sure you have strong financial acumen. Make sure you have a great executive team. Make sure you put advisors like myself and our team around you so that you can make strong financial decisions. I'm telling you right now, I have seen people that literally decide not to take advice and it's going to cost them 8 figures. I'm telling you, I see 8-figure mistakes all the time with some of these so-called groups. You've got to make smart decisions. It's worth getting advice around that. Build it fundamentally sound. And if you build it fundamentally sound and you build an amazing organization, if you want to build a group, when you get there, you can sell it off for a great multiple at the point which the market will bear it. But you have to be fundamentally strong enough to be able to be patient if the market isn't there. So don't make promises you can't fulfill. When you go to acquire on the right way. If someone's practices, worth something, pay them, build a great team, build a great business, pay people their value of their business. You'll find out over time that you have a doctor who gets paid well, who stays on board. There's a way to do this right and there's a way to do this wrong. And I'm telling you, there's going to be a lot of practices in the marketplace that are going to be available because a bunch of bozos don't know what. No, I can't switch terms. Yahoos don't know what they're doing, and so you're going to see a flood of garbage in the marketplace. Mark my words. You can mark this podcast and come back to it. That's going to happen in the marketplace, and the great businesses that actually care about people and care about creating a great business model will prevail in the end, and they will get valuation.
And I think this is perfect because this is happy 4th of July, everybody. This is right after 4th of July, and we're 6 months in. So you know what that means for private equity firms and people that are looking to make deals. These next 6 months, they're going to come. They're going to try to get stuff across the finish line by the end of December. So you might have gotten spoken to at the beginning of the year. This is when people are going to start. You haven't heard from them in a while. They're putting the contracts together. This is really when they're going to start pushing it because they want to get this across the line by the end of the year. So, if you are looking to eventually, if you are looking at selling or you're looking at buying, make sure the deals are in place. Utilize, some of the advisors at Tower Leadership or your advisors that you currently use to look at these deals. These next 6 months, it's going to be kind of crazy. People are going to try to push you into things that you're not comfortable getting pushed into, overpromise things. So just keep your guard up. Always, remember, Eric always says, guard your cup.
Guard your cup, man.
Make sure you're doing that. Keep listening to things like this. Pass this along to your friends. Subscribe, like us on YouTube. We're going to keep doing these, as the market shifts. We're going to bring new market content to you guys. So if you have any questions or want us to talk about something in particular, maybe even, a deal that you guys are looking at or something, an example you sent, comment on the Facebook post or email into info@Tower Leadership. Eric and I will discuss it for you. We want to make sure you get as much value out of this as possible. So as always, Mr. Morin, thanks for joining us in the studio, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.